Mission. This ministry is now 10 years old. We spent 7 years in Mississippi supporting the recovery after Hurricane Katrina, and then now 3 years in Oklahoma City following various tornadoes that have hit the area and helping them recover in that effort. But one of the best things about this ministry personally for me is yes, we are doing this wonderful work. We're building homes. We're helping people refurbish their homes. We're getting to know people there, and we're building relationships and sharing the love of Christ. But the joy for me has always been the team and how we bond. And I think it was very appropriate this morning, the message about loving one another and showing preference for each other. And, that's been a blessing of this trip for me, is getting to know people along the way. And we kind of have this, whatever you want to call it, Katrina team or OKC team, but we have a family of servants who have traveled together and lived together and learned to love each other. And it's something that we now can apply to our lives here when we serve in ministries at church, if we're coaching basketball teams, if we're leading other ministry teams here at church, we can apply that same love. And it's nice to see that in the body of Christ, we love each other. Great things can happen. One of the people that I've had the privilege of serving along with now, this was my 9th year serving with him, is our next speaker. That's Tommy Yamada. He's a dear friend, and I've asked him to share a little bit this morning.
In August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, and I think right after it happened, and for the months following, people here at our church said, what can we do to help? And various things were discussed, and then basically, nothing happened. And so then 2006 came along, and you said, well, are we going to send any teams to New Orleans? Because I think in all of our minds after Hurricane Katrina hit, we, at least and myself included, we thought the devastation was mostly New Orleans. Well, what happened was, and it's a long story, but to make it short, my good friend Dennis Cho was called to lead a team to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We're going, Mississippi Gulf Coast, where is that first of all? So I actually had to look on a map, and as it turned out, more destruction happened along the Mississippi Gulf Coast than in New Orleans, but it was over a wider area, so it didn't get very much press coverage. Anyway, so Dennis led the first team in, I think it was either April or May of 2007. And at first, me personally, I had never been on a short-term mission before. I mean, I was the sender. My kids went to Mexicali. I supported them. My daughter had gone on a couple of short-term missions to Japan. I supported her. I concluded I was the sender. I wasn't a cohort. But because my good friend was leading the team, I said, maybe I'll consider signing up. And I did. And believe me, back then, the sign-up process was very complicated. It took literally hours to fill out your application, get the referrals, and then once you went through an interview, once the team was selected, there was actually required reading a book, not just an article, a book, and you had to actually write a book report, okay? Just to go, okay? So anyway, eventually we went, and there were 10 of us that first year, and we didn't know anything what we're doing. I don't know if any of us had any construction background other than maybe, just doing minor things around the house. But anyway, we went, and we went. Actually, there was an American Baptist thing that they wanted a lot of teams to go to the Mississippi Gulf Coast and serve there. And even though it was almost a year and a half, almost closer to 2 years after Hurricane Katrina, there were still tons of volunteers going to that area, volunteering with Habitat for Humanity and at that time was Habitat for Humanity of the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And so we stayed, a home builder had come back into the area to build homes in the sub $100,000 range, which was, for the working class. The only home builders that returned were the ones that working on like more mansion type houses at the $300,000 range, which would be equivalent to like $1 million home here. Anyway, so the Habitat was the only home builder that had come back that was rebuilding homes. And they said they would probably be doing this for at least 10 years. And as soon as I heard that, I really felt God calling me to say, says, will you commit to coming back for 10 years? And I said, I'll think about it. Well, actually, as the week went on, it was confirmed to me. So I said, okay, God, if you want me to come back 10 years, I'll come back, if you send the team. So anyway, from that time on, every year we would get ready to send a team. My thought process was, I will sign up automatically, and if God says, or closes the door, then he'll let me know. But he never did. So this was my 10th year. And I kind of went with some mixed emotions because, feeling like, oh, is this the end or what? And the feeling I got, after the end of the week was, the word I got was completeness. Yeah, this does complete that commitment. Now, my teammates and friends have asked me, well, does that mean you're not going next year? I said, well, no, it doesn't. I said, but, I'm going to have to pray about it, and if God tells me to go, I'll go. But the bottom line is, it's one of obedience, and that's the thing we've learned, I think, throughout this whole time is that, yeah, I think I went with the mentality in the beginning that it was a sacrifice. I think the biggest sacrifice we make going is, committing or using a week of your own vacation time. The finances aren't that great. We have a great church that supports us. We raise money. This has been a well-supported ministry. And, the cost actually going either to Mississippi or to Oklahoma City really isn't that great. But I think what we've learned over the years is that, it's not about sacrifice, it's about obedience. You go in obedience to God, and He just provides great things. Every year God has given me a word that kind of summarizes each trip, because I remember after the third or fourth trip, one of the first questions people would ask me was, well, how was it this year? Was it better? Or how does it compare? But, they're all different and special in their own way. Now, I remember that first year, I went and my desire was to really, in my mind, I thought I was making this huge sacrifice, and so I felt like what I wanted to feel was God's pleasure, Okay, but it got really turned around. So by the end of the week, I think what I really sensed was an overwhelming sense of privilege. Privilege to be called and to be able to serve on that team. And, so as I stand here and I share with you, I went 10 years. I don't say that in a boastful way. I say it in a real kind of a humbling way that I've been allowed to go for 10 years, and there's this overwhelming sense of privilege. It's kind of like, do any of you, if I throw out the name Jim Loskatov, any of you know that name? I think the only person that I know that might know that name is probably David Miyahara. He's such a basketball junkie, but he has 7 NBA titles. Okay, there's only 6 people in the history of the league that have more. Okay, he's from the West Coast. He got drafted by the Boston Celtics in I think '56, and I think Bill Russell he got drafted in '55. Bill Russell was in '56, and so he was on the first 7 of Bill Russell's title teams. But you never heard that guy's name, and he recently passed away this last December. But I'm sure he would not claim to be the 7th greatest player in NBA history. He just had to be fortunate to be on that team, and he has 7 NBA titles. That's more than Jordan, Kareem, Kobe, Duncan, But I'm sure he would just kind of privileged just to be in that place. And that's kind of the way I feel. Each year has been different and special in its own way. Each year had its set of challenges, but each year I think we saw God show up in ways that we couldn't have imagined. To me, one of the biggest blessings of going all these years is, I think, the friendships that I've been able to deepen and new friendships that I have made. And Lauren alluded to some of these. The third year we went, well, the first 2 years it was 2 teams of 10. The third year we grew to a team of 21 guys. And we got split into 2 work groups. The second work group worked with a guy, the site supervisor was a guy named Brad Holland. And some of you may remember that name. He wrote 2 letters to our church, just commending our church for sending these teams. I didn't meet him that year, but I heard about him. The next year, we actually worked under him. I got to meet him, and to this day, we still correspond once in a while. He's now a construction supervisor for the New Orleans Habitat for Humanity. That 4th year, we also met Paul Waters and Denise Ryback. They were just people working for Habitat. They eventually rose in the ranks. They eventually started dating, and 2 years ago, they actually invited us all to their weddings in Cleveland. And actually, Peter and I and 2 other people went to their wedding, and it was just a great time. And I consider them very good friends. To the point where, if I was ever, visiting the Mississippi Gulf Coast, I would have no qualms about asking them if I could stay with them. And it's been very good in terms of, I think I have this image of the first day I met Paul. It was raining at lunch, so we were kind of sitting all around in an empty house. The roof, fortunately, was up, so it was dry. And then we just started talking, and then found out his background. He found out a little bit about me, and then we're kind of quizzing each other about our faith a little bit, just to see if we're doctrinally sound and things like that. And then he threw out this thing about Acts 29, and I said, wait a minute, what Bible are you reading? Because Acts only has 28 chapters. But he's talking about an organization, that based on Acts 29, it's the next step. Anyway, but I think early on we discovered, we kind of matched theologically, and so we kind of hit it off really well and very easily. And the neat thing for me is that when we see them, like maybe once a year, is that Paul and I can kind of just start in on a conversation, very honest and open about our faith and some of our struggles and how we're growing. So, and I have the sense that it's kind of like Paul's missionary journeys in a way, where he would go and maybe he would meet Priscilla and Aquila, and they would just have this natural bond, even though they might not see each other that often. So that's been a real blessing. But also a real blessing has been just deepening friendships or even making friendships within the group. 10 years ago, I didn't know Peter Lau. I only knew Peter Lau as that guy that would always raise his hand, ask questions, and make the business meetings twice as long as they needed to be. And my wife said, yeah, he's the X factor on this trip, meaning it could go really anyway. But to this day, I will say, Peter's become one of my closest friends, a brother, someone I can really share heart to heart with. So that's been a really big blessing. There's, I could go on and on, but, I've got about a minute left here. So, one of the big challenges for me was that, I'm not a natural evangelist. So that first year, we're going, and I think Kyle Shimazaki was kind of just starting his role as the outreach pastor. You know how Kyle is. He's just an evangelist. So, we're all thinking, we want to have these Kyle-type experiences. So we go to Mississippi, and, none of that happened for me. And
frankly, I felt a little bad. I felt a little like, did I fail? But what God reminded me of was that the Great Commission is, yeah, it starts with sharing the gospel, but it's really, God calls us to make disciples. Okay, so what happens when you go to a place and all the people you meet are believers, so you're not going to share the gospel with them and have to make a confession of faith, but we are called to make disciples. So how are you helping to make disciples? And over the years, I've realized that it's not just making disciples of the people we meet, but it's also making disciples of your teammates. And that has been a blessing to me of being able to speak truth and to receive truth from my various teammates. So I would encourage all of you, if you feel like you're only a sender and you've never gone, this is a great opportunity to kind of get your feet wet. It's you're not going to Thailand where you can't drink the water. I mean, you can drink the tap water in OKC. You have indoor plumbing, it all flushes. They have Walmarts and Home Depots. They've got plenty of nice places to eat. Probably the most uncomfortable thing is sharing bathrooms, sharing sleeping facilities, and being crammed into a minivan, after a hard day's work or something like that. So it's truly been a blessing, and if I don't go next year, I'm truly going to miss it, but who knows? So, but the other thing is, I really want to thank the church body as a whole for sending us, because I think over these years we've really realized that our church sends groups well. The support we get, not only financially, but the MSGs we have, we feel very supported, because we've met a lot of other volunteers who just come on their own, not with a church, but just on their own, and they really don't have the support from people back home. So thank you again, and I really encourage you, just if you feel an inkling of God calling you to go, just sign up, And Craig's a great leader, Dennis couldn't continue in his leadership the second year, but Craig really stepped up, and he's been leading the group for the last 9 years. Thank you.